My package arrived several hours ago, so I've had several hours to process this information, and I'm still in deep shock, okay? I ordered on Thursday, the package is here on Monday. My mind is blown. I'm not gonna jinx myself by saying that this is the kind of service I expect on a regular basis, but it would be mighty nice if I did get this kind of service every time I paid for express shipping, because this is the kind of service I expect when I pay 17 euros. This is express shipping. Take notes, Pat McGrath Labs. Anywho, hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. I have tried my absolute best not to look like a hot mess, but if I do look a little bit disheveled to you, it is one, because it is the absolute end of the day, hence the weird lighting in my room, and second of all, hay fever is in like full glory, full bloom, and I've had to blow my nose like 500 times today. Although this lighting might actually be working in my favor and I may be looking a lot more radiant than I look in real life. Let's hope that's the case. Anywho, it is the end of the day, but I really wanted to come and talk about the new products from the color Balm collection. I think that's the name of the collection, because I know a lot of you are really excited about it and really curious to hear my thoughts, and honestly I'm also just really excited to try it. So as you can see, I still have eye makeup on. I am going to remove that a little bit later. For starters, I've just refreshed my base a little bit so that we can test the new cream blushes. I've removed everything. There's no bronzer, no blush, no highlighter, nothing, just my base, and I've done very light base, just the Chanel Water Fresh complexion tint. For those of you who may not be up to speed, Pat McGrath Labs sort of surprised us by coming out with a collection in between her spring collection and the new mothership, and it's like a full-on collection, not just a little teeny tiny product. No, it's 6 cream blushes and an extra luxe quad that we're getting here. I was very excited to try the cream blushes, particularly because they are a completely new product for the Pat McGrath line. We've never seen cream blushes from her before. She has the little like dual-ended stick highlighter balm situation, but she's never really released a product of this category before. So I'm super excited to try these. There are 6 colors in the range. I picked the 2 that I thought were the most exciting to me. So without further ado, I'm just going to open them, we're going to swatch them, and we're going to immediately put them on the face, because I honestly do not know what to expect. Now the first thing is, this is the outer packaging that they come in. It's really beautiful, classic for Pat McGrath Labs, with the little roses. I must tell you, just from like holding the box like this, I can tell you this is not the heftiest, most luxurious packaging that Pat McGrath has ever given us. Inside you will find the little stick, which comes in this beautiful like corally pink color with the Pat McGrath Labs logo. It does have some cutesy little detailing, like the golden details on the packaging are quite adorable, but do not be fooled. There is nothing like luxuriously or hefty feeling about this packaging. So if that's something that you were hoping for, unfortunately you're not going to get it. On the other hand, in terms of price, these are what I would call affordable Pat McGrath Labs, because these are priced at 28 euros, which is one of the cheapest products in her line. Her blushes, like her powder blushes, are, I want to say, something in the range of 40 euros. So I would put this more on like the mid-tier range pricing rather than the luxury. Perhaps that is an intentional choice, as the brand is trying to become a little bit more inclusive and reaching a larger audience. Who's to say? I don't know. Anyone is allowed to feel any way they want about it, but just heads up, if you were expecting hefty packaging, it is not what you're getting for 28 euros. But let's hope that the formula inside is really glorious. Now the 2 shades that I picked out are the shade Peach Lotus. Peach Lotus is the lightest shade in the range, so you twist it up like this. Pretty standard like stick cream blush packaging, and this is described as a soft peach color. So let us swatch this color. Oh, this is applying beautifully. It feels like very soft, nourishing and balmy on the hand, just as the name would suggest, because it has the name Balm in it. And it is a beautiful, like soft, I wouldn't really call it a peach, more like a soft coral color. There is possibly a little bit more orange here than pink, which is exactly the reason I chose this color, because I want it to be more peach leaning than pink leaning. And I'm even more excited to try the second blush that I picked out, which is the shade Sunkissed Seduction. Now, as soon as I read the word sienna in the description of this color, I was sold. I love things that have sienna tones to them, and I am hoping that this is going to be sort of like a burnt brick peachy terracotta sort of color, and that is exactly what this looks like, at least in the packaging. So let's give it a little swatch. I really hope this is not going to be too red, because I've seen it applied on people and it tends to look a little bit red. Oh no, this is beautiful. Oh, this is exactly the color that I was hoping for. It is a little bit of like a brick terracotta with slightly cinnamony tones to it. Beautiful. Oh, we're going to have to swatch this next to Playground from Victoria Beckham Beauty, because I feel like the two colors are rather similar to each other. Now, when it comes to application of this product, everyone's going to have their preferred method. Some people are just going to use it straight from the stick, others are going to use it just on their fingers. I prefer to use products like this with a dense synthetic brush, and that is the one that I've been using for years already with similar type products, and I just like the effect that it gives on the skin the most. So that is also what I'm going to use today. This is the Spectrum BO2 brush, which, as you can see, is a rather fluffy, rather dense synthetic brush. This stick is big enough for me to be able to go straight into the product with my brush, which is exactly how I would approach it with most other stick type products. The only one that I apply differently is my Victoria Beckham one, because the Victoria Beckham one is teeny tiny and I'm always afraid of breaking it. So for today I'm just going to do what I would usually do when I approach a product like this. So I'm going to take a little bit like this on my brush, and then I'm going to start slowly building it onto my cheek. Well, there isn't much to build because I picked up more than enough product, as you can already tell, because my cheeks are becoming beautifully peachy and glowy. This is applying absolutely beautifully, and at least from what I can tell, it is quite buildable because you can shear it out quite nicely. I picked up a little bit more. I'm going to basically make my cheeks look like Bozo the Clown, because I want to make sure that you can see the colors and the texture and the formula of these really well. Oh my lord, this is so pretty. Can you see that? It's not too waxy, it's not too sticky, it gives just enough glow without looking like it's greasy. I love it. This is gorgeous. And it was super easy to apply. As you can tell, I'm not really encountering any issues with the blush being patchy or lifting anything underneath. Now, granted, I wear a very light base, so for me, lifting of product doesn't really ever happen. I've never experienced a cream, liquid, or stick product actually lifting my foundation underneath, so this is also not doing that. And I just realized that I should have probably zoomed you in. So now that you're zoomed in, this is the shade Peach Lotus on my left cheek. I think it is beautiful. I don't know, I feel like maybe it has a little bit of like a soft filter effect on the skin, because I don't see any of like my skin texture being enhanced. If anything, I think my skin texture looks improved. I do want to mention this just as a side note though. Possibly, if you're applying this product with your fingers, just straight from the stick, it might look a little bit more luminous than what you're seeing on my cheek right now, just because I am applying it with a very dense brush, and possibly the bristles are soaking up a little bit of those extra waxes. So maybe just as a little experiment, still on this cheek by the way, I'm going to apply a little bit of the product like this, and then I'm going to blend it with my fingers just to see how that looks like. That is not a method that I would prefer for myself. I never really apply my face products with my fingers, but I just wanted to show you in case you were curious. I think maybe there's a little bit more luminosity added to the skin. I don't really think it's excessively more luminous or waxy or greasy looking, but possibly if you're looking for a slightly more luminous effect, then you could go in with your fingers. And if you would like to tone down the luminosity, I would advise you to use a very dense brush. It doesn't have to be synthetic bristles, but just very dense. Ooh, and now the shade Sunkissed Seduction, which I am so excited about. I'm going to pick up a little bit again on my brush and then use it on my right cheek. My right cheek is unfortunately not my most photogenic for YouTube cheek. It's a very strange angle for me to use, but we're going to make the best out of it. So this color is definitely applying very similar to Paradise Venus from the powder blush line, which looks like this, very terracotta in the packaging, but on me applies quite red. So I think it's just something to do with the depth of my skin tone. that makes this blush appear slightly more red than brown terracotta. It's still a really beautiful color. And I just really love how these are applying. They're so smooth, so beautiful, they blend so easily, so effortlessly. I love them. So just to recap, on this side I've got the shade Sunkissed Seduction, and on this side we've got the shade Peach Lotus. I am very happy with both shades that I picked up. They are quite different from each other. This definitely has like a soft coral vibe to it, and I'm really enjoying it. It's really fresh for the summer. And this one is giving me basically the exact same effect that Paradise Venus does, which is a little bit of like that sun-kissed cheek. Beautiful, both of them. I love the formula. So far I have nothing negative to say about these. Now I'm very curious how they would wear throughout the day, but that is not something that I can report back on today because it's already the end of the day. I'm just going to wear them for a few more hours. They're not going to go through the grinder when I, you know, have to bike to work all day, then come home. So I'm going to report back on a different day when I've actually worn them out and about without any, you know, extra fixative methods. And I will let you know how I feel about the formula, but so far I think it is beautiful. It is, like I said, not too waxy, not too glowy, but it just gives you enough glow to make your skin look healthy. And I would describe the finish as a, yeah, depends on how you apply it again, because on this cheek I applied a little bit also with my fingers and I can see that my cheek is now a little bit more glowy. I think if you apply this with a dense brush, like I prefer to, you're going to get a bit more of like a semi-dewy finish, if that makes any sense to you. And if you would like to get that completely dewy glass skin-like finish, you will have to go in with your fingers, because that's what you're going to achieve without the bristles soaking up a little bit of that extra glossiness. The formula on these blushes is beautiful so far. I find them really impeccable. I can't really fault them for anything. They look glorious on the skin. Now I will say this, the shade range is rather limited in the sense that it's pretty blushy. It's like pretty standard for Pat McGrath blushy colors. So if you wanted something very unique, you're not going to find it in this range. There are a couple of corals, a couple of pinks, and there is this like plummier berry type shade, which is the deepest shade. Perhaps she's going to expand this in the future, but my thoughts on this are she just released these and she just released them now for the summer. And I think the colors that are released are very appropriate for the summer, so we can only hope that in the future she's going to, you know, add colors to the range which are a little bit more unique. But as far as the actual blushes go, I think these are impeccable. I love them. The packaging, you have to consider this one for yourself, because like I said, it is not the most hefty and luxurious feeling in the hand. Personally, I think it's really cute, and when I saw the price I already thought that these are not going to be super hefty in the hands. Now, I want to do a couple of comparison swatches before we move on to the quad, but I also must warn you, my collection of like liquid cream stick blushes is pretty limited. So there isn't going to be much that we can compare to, but I thought maybe just for shits and giggles we can compare and I can like feel the formula compared to other formulas. Now to start off with, I want to maybe compare the shade Peach Lotus to one of my Daniel Sandler blushes. Now the Daniel Sandler blush formula is completely different. I'm actually going to blend this out a little bit because I want to feel it a bit more with my fingers. It feels glossy, but it doesn't feel waxy. That is very nice. Now the color that I want to compare to is one of my Daniel Sandler watercolor blushes, and mine is in the shade Luxe, which came from a set. So this is not even a color that you can get from the regular Daniel Sandler line, but I was just curious because I think the colors are actually quite similar. They're both like this corally peach color. Oh, interesting. This is a bit more pink leaning compared to this. This is indeed a bit more peach and really like a soft peach color. And I'm really happy that this one has a little bit more of a softness to it and a little bit more of like those apricot tones, which is exactly what I was hoping for. Let me put back the swatch of Peach Lotus here, because there is another shade that I would like to compare to, just in case anyone is into Sunkissed and still owns these, or perhaps they're still being sold. But I have this shimmering blush from them in the shade 03, which was released a couple of years ago in the summer, and I feel like it is also quite a similar shade of blush. This is a gorgeous formula. It is much less runny compared to the one from Daniel Sandler. This is more of a gel formula, and I would also say the color of this is a bit more similar to the one from Pat. So these two are probably the most similar in my collection in terms of like cream type products that are in this shade. Obviously Sunkissed also know what they're doing when it comes to formulation, so this is also an impeccable texture on the skin, and I must give it to them in terms of packaging. This was around 30 euros at the time, so they are about the same like price range, but this is so much more luxurious feeling because it has the little frosted bottle and it feels quite heavy in the hand, and it just looks really much more luxurious compared to this. But also maybe something to point out here in terms of formula, you can see the one from Sunkissed kind of set, and it almost looks like a demi matte finish on the skin, whereas this one still retains its dewiness. So that is maybe something to point out about the formula from Pat McGrath Labs, that if you were hoping that it is a formula that sort of like sets into like a more demi matte finish on the skin, I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is going to remain like this, sort of like dewy on the skin. So that is maybe something to take into consideration when you're picking up a color from this collection, that is, it's not a self-setting formula. Now let's compare the two colors that I'm actually the most curious about. So those are Sunkissed Seduction from Pat McGrath and Playground from Victoria Beckham. Victoria Beckham gets an A++ in terms of packaging, obviously also much more expensive in terms of price. But I was curious how these two colors would compare to each other, because at least by eye they seemed rather similar. However, now that I'm looking at them like this, I would actually say that they're quite different. I think the one from Victoria Beckham is possibly much more neutral toned compared to the one from Pat McGrath. So let's swatch Playground here and then blend it out a bit. This is a beautiful formula, but also I think it is much less luminous, and maybe it is a bit more, it dries down a bit more to like a demi matte finish compared to the one from Pat. So let's swatch Sunkissed Seduction here and then blend it out a bit. Okay, once you blend them out on the skin, I honestly don't think that they're that different from each other. We can split hairs to search for differences in their tones, but honestly I think they're quite similar. Now, I will say this though, when I apply Playground on my skin, Playground looks much more like a neutral cinnamon kind of color, whereas this obviously translated quite red on my skin. So there's something about the terracotta tones of Pat McGrath that translate very red on someone with my depth and undertone of skin. So just keep that in mind. Like this on the swatch, they seem pretty similar, but in reality when you apply them side by side, they're going to be quite different from each other. And I think you can already also tell, again, this looks a bit more, it's not really a matte, but it sets down a bit more to like a demi matte, whereas this remains quite, like, not really waxy, but it remains a little bit more dewy and glossy. Perhaps a similar shade to this would be Dantes Dream from Lisa Eldridge. Mine is depotted in here because the packaging was busted, but I didn't want to get rid of the color. So I want to show you possibly how this color looks compared to the ones from Victoria and Pat McGrath. Interestingly, this has much more like deep reddish tones to it, but on the skin it actually translates like more of like a brick brown red. So it's very interesting to see how swatching them and like putting them on your skin can be quite different. But I would consider all of these to be in the same family. They're both like those terracotta tones with slightly different undertones to them. So I have done my absolute best to remove my eye makeup as much as possible. There may be flecks of Rosefire Nectar floating around my eyelids, so if you do see purple sparkles on my lids, that's because I could not completely remove Rosefire Nectar. We're just going to have to deal with that. Now let's move on to the quad, because I'm just super curious. So this is how the quad looks like in terms of outer packaging. The name of the quad is Passion Fleur, and I want to say the packaging of this is almost exactly identical to the one from Voyeuristic Vixen, but I'm too lazy to grab Voyeuristic Vixen. But the difference is that this bad boy comes in the corresponding pinky coral packaging, just like the blushes, whereas Voyeuristic Vixen comes in the original black packaging. And then let's take a look at the contents of this quad. So this is how Passion Fleur looks on the inside. To my utter disappointment, when I opened it, the first thing I could immediately notice was the lack of any sort of flaky shade. There is nothing like Rosefire Nectar in here. There is a matte and 3 metallic shades. That is it. Second of all, we retain the ugly, you know, distribution of the pans. We still have the smaller pans against this much bigger background, which is just so aesthetically displeasing to me. I cannot for the life of me understand why is it so hard to make something that is, you know, more symmetrical. But you know, that's just my personal gripe with this packaging. And now let's swatch the eyeshadows and hope that they're going to be more interesting than they look in the pan. I'm going to start off with the matte, which is a deep aubergine purple. Is it something we've never seen from Pat McGrath? I doubt it. We've seen plenty of these types of shades. It's swatched beautifully. It is very soft, very pigmented, very saturated. But I am not sure about this color because I don't really like to wear plums like this. But we will see once I put it on the eye how I feel about it. And then let's swatch the metallic shades. I'm going to swatch first these 2 top shades here. So the light pink and the corally peachy pink color. So this is how they look like on my fingers. This is Skin Show Pink Dawn, which is one of her Skin Show shades, but like with a very strong pink tone to it, like a coral pink tone to it. And this just looks to be like a straight up coral with maybe some pink sparkle to it, but it is definitely just a metallic shade. I don't see much of a duochrome. I don't even see much of sparkle going on in here. It is just a good old metallic. FYI, that was the shade Rosefire Glow. And now finally let's swatch the shade Sienna Moonlight, which is the taupey looking shade, which hopefully has a bit more of sparkle to it. This looks quite beautiful, and I think it has a bit more sparkle compared to the other 2 shades. It is again a shade that it's not like we have never seen this from Pat before. It's like a taupey brown with maybe a little bit of pink sparkle to it. It's very hard to tell also now because my lighting is so blinding. So here you have the swatches of the 4 shades. So far I am not super impressed with any of them. None of them seems to be something super special, anything we haven't seen from Pat before, or anything even remotely interesting in terms of texture. I'm sorry to say that, I'm quite bummed out about it. But let's put them on the eyes, because sometimes I swatch things and I think they're not super impressive, and then I put them on my eyes and I'm all happy, giggly and giddy on the inside. So let's put them to the test. So I have zoomed you in a little bit, but not too offensively close. And if we're only going to stick to this quad, I will have to be using this purpley plummy shade. So that's what I'm going to do, because I want to demo the quad as best as I can for you. But I think in the future I'm probably going to surround a lot of these shades with browns. But I'm actually quite curious how I'm going to feel about this plummy purple shade, because for those of you who have been around my channel, you know that I'm not the biggest fan of her plummy mattes. Just on my skin tone, they tend to make me look a little bit sickly. But this seems to have really beautiful tones to it. I really hope this works out for me, because I think this is a beautiful color. So I'm going to start by applying a little bit of this here in the outer corner of my eye. And may I say, it is quite difficult to do your eyeshadow with mascara on. So that's going to be an additional challenge of the day. I'm just fluffing that here through the outer corner, and then I'm going to start buffing it through the crease just to see how well it blends out. Now I can see that it's already grabbing onto a little patch here. That's not the fault of the eyeshadow, that's my fault, because, you know, I just removed my other makeup. I didn't necessarily start my makeup off with a fresh base, so if there is any sort of patchiness, take that with a grain of salt, that it's possible that this is just because of my imperfect preparation for this look. Now I will say this, I like the tone of this shade when it's packed on and in its full opacity. It's like a really beautiful, like sort of plummy purple. It reminds me a little bit of the purple in Bronze Seduction, but as soon as I start blending it out, it becomes exactly the kind of tone that I hate on myself, which is a little bit more of a maroon reddish purple. So I think I would probably opt to just put this in my outer corner without blending it out too much. I mean, it is blending out just fine, and it is a beautiful eyeshadow. I think it's going to look absolutely stunning on a lot of people. It's just that it's not my personal preference to wear a lot of these sort of like plummy purples. I prefer browns. I think just to give you an impression of what kind of looks you can achieve by only using this palette and incorporating this matte, I will just apply the plum purple also on my right eye, and we're just going to switch up the lid shades. But obviously, if you wanted to, you know, change up the tones of this and make it a little bit more neutral or brown leaning, you could go in a different direction with your outer corner and crease. But I think I want to just show you what the quad can do on its own today before we move into any sort of variations of that look. So I'm just going to apply the plummy matte also on this side. Okay, this eyeshadow blended out quite nicely, especially all things considered. So now I'm very curious to go in with the metallic shades. And I think what I'm going to do is I will put this one on one of my eyes, this one on my other eye, and I'm just going to put this one on my inner corners. And I'm going to go in straight with my finger. Now, usually I would apply shades like this over a glitter glue, but I can't be bothered today, so I'm just going to apply them as it is all over my lids using my fingers. I would describe this eyeshadow as a coral with a little bit of a pink flip to it. I can think of several eyeshadows just in Pat McGrath's collection that are quite similar to this. We might do a couple of comparison swatches at the end of this video, but before that, let's apply the taupey shade on my other lid, because I'm actually a bit more excited about this shade. I really like this shade. I think this is going to be one of my favorite neutrals in the future. It has a beautiful lightness to it, so it brightens up your lids, and it does have a bit of dimension because there's a little bit of sparkle going on in there. I think this shade might be one that I end up enjoying quite a bit from this quad. Now I'm going to take a little pencil brush and just apply a tiny bit of the Skin Show shade into my inner corners and a bit more of the plum underneath my lower lashes so that we can complete the look. So this pink shade is also one that you can definitely use on your lids. It has a bit of like that cooler pink tone to it. So it would also look very beautiful together with the plummy matte shade. And finally I'm going to run a little bit of that plum shade on my lower lashes so we can complete the look. So here are two very quick looks with the new Look Squad in Passion Fleur. A few initial thoughts that I have about this quad, and you can probably already just sense from my tone that I'm not like overly enthusiastic about it. But you also have to keep in mind that I went into this with the expectation that there are going to be Rose Fire Nectar type shades in here, because from the initial videos and swatches of some of these eyeshadows, I really thought that both of these would be like that flaky Rose Fire Nectar type of formula. And I had that expectation until not that long ago, okay? I've been cut off Instagram, my feed refuses to update, so I have to purposefully go on brands' pages to see what they have posted. So I only recently went on Pat McGrath's website and I watched a reel where someone had this quad very up close and personal to the camera, and I could tell that there seemed to be none of those flaky shades as I was expecting. So for the past couple of days I've been mentally preparing myself for the fact that there aren't going to be any super glittery sparkly shades in here, but I'm still a little bit bummed out that that is indeed the case. Until the last moment, until I opened the quad, I was really hoping there would be something more interesting in terms of texture in here, but there isn't. Are these beautiful eyeshadows? They're beautiful eyeshadows. Can you do beautiful looks with them? Absolutely. And you can also take the look in several different directions depending on your preference. You can completely omit the matte and just rely on both of these as your like one and done eyeshadows. I think they're going to work beautifully for that. I think this pink is actually a really interesting like cooler toned pink eyeshadow. I quite like the tone of this. This is quite repetitive in Pat's collection. Like I said, I can think of at least a couple off the top of my head. This taupey shade is probably going to be one of my favorites in here because it is actually quite a beautiful tone, and I am curious to pair it with more like neutral browns rather than the plum shade. The plum shade is a beautiful eyeshadow in terms of texture and quality, but I'm just not crazy about them plums. We've seen so many plums in her last like 3 or 4 palettes that I think we are all plumped out. I'm plumped out. So those are my like initial thoughts about this quad. I will definitely use it a bit more, pair it with other palettes to give you a more like full rounded impression. But just for starters, I think you should be prepared that there is nothing special, nothing unique, nothing truly exciting about this quad. It's just pretty. You will probably enjoy it. The eyeshadows are beautiful quality, what we know and expect from Pat McGrath, but they are nothing extraordinary. They don't rise above. I'm not gonna go too crazy on the comparison swatches. I'm just going to do the eyeshadows that I feel like are the most similar within her collection. So I want to start off with the matte shade, and there are two palettes where I can think of like similar type of purples that I personally own, so I want to swatch those. As I mentioned, we've got the purple shade here from Bronze Seduction, which seems to be a much deeper purple actually. Much deeper in tone. And then a sort of similar looking purple is also present in her Divine Rose 2 palette, but I suspect this one has a bit more of those annoying maroon tones to it. So out of the three, you can see that there are similarities, but there are definitely also differences. So here we have the one from the new quad. This is Passion Fleur. This is Bronze Seduction, and this is going to swatch like shit because these eyeshadows are part of her like older matte formula, which is much harder pressed and swatches like absolute shite. It applies nicely, I promise. It looks quite nice on the eye, but it applies like absolute shite when you try to swatch it. And this is the one from Divine Rose 2. Divine Rose 2 already has her newer, softer type formula. One last plum that I want to swatch is actually the one from Moonlit Seduction. Let's see how that compares to all the other ones, because I actually don't really like this one too much. Oh, again, see, it has a bit more of those like stronger reddish tones, although I would describe this more as like terracotta mauve tones, but I still like the tones of this a lot more than these two, for example. This one I quite like, but like I said, it's almost like a blackened plum. These two are not my favorites, especially this one. It's very maroony on my eyes and it makes me look extremely tired. I actually think this one doesn't look all bad. Alright, next let's watch some dupes for this like corally peachy pink shade. The first one that immediately comes to my mind is from Utopian Dream, but the one in Utopian Dream has a much more interesting texture. It is somewhat flakier, somewhat more sparkly. It is just a more interesting shade. So this is the one from Utopia. This is the new one. The new one is also a little bit maybe more coppery in tone, and because it is a bit more coppery in tone, it also reminds me of the beautiful creamy copper that we have in the Ritualistic Rose quad. Oh, the texture of this eyeshadow is phenomenal. This is basically like a cream eyeshadow. Beautiful. So let's do a little bit of swatching. Here is the new one from Passion Fleur. Here is the shade from Utopian Dream. And finally we have the copper from Ritualistic Rose. The one from Ritualistic Rose is a little bit deeper and more neutral leaning. This one definitely has a much more interesting sparkle going on to it, and this one is just a metallic, coppery, rosy, peachy pink kind of color. I just took out Voyeuristic Vixen to do a comparison swatch, and I just wanted to show you that the outer boxes indeed are pretty identical. This one just has like the roses are pink, and here everything is purple. But the eyeshadow that I want to compare from Voyeuristic Vixen is the taupey one. So let's compare the taupe in the new quad to the taupe that came in the original Voyeuristic Vixen quad, which is this shade here, which again has, even this shade has a more interesting texture compared to the new one. They are slightly different. The old one is a little bit deeper in tone. This is a really pretty eyeshadow. And here is the one from Voyeuristic Vixen, which I also think is much sparklier. This shade has like micro glitter in it, and when you apply it on your lids, it almost looks like you have like little pieces of glass on your lid. It is beautiful. I just thought of another taupe that looks quite similar from the Celestial Nirvana palette, so let me pull that out. And the shade in question is this one here. So let me quickly compare this as well to the other shades.
And I think this is also going to be the last comparison swatch. Wow, this is even deeper than the other two. Okay, so they're all beautiful brown tops, but they all have their merits. Now, I will say I think this shade is probably the one that so far I'm enjoying the most in this palette. This is just a first impression. Honestly, I just wanted to come on here and very quickly show you what this collection is all about, because I know that you're all very curious about it. I think the cream blushes are really beautiful. You will have to, you know, obviously consider the fact that they're cream blushes, so they're going to look a little bit more dewy. Are you someone who likes to wear cream products? Take that into account as well. But other than that, I'm quite happy with everything about these. The qual, on the other hand, I don't know that I would recommend buying this full price. To me personally feels a little bit meh, a little bit uninspired. Does it fit with this collection? I think it fits beautifully with this collection, and it is my own fault that I'm trying to buy all the Pat McGrath eyeshadows. Nobody made me buy a repetitive eyeshadow palette or something that I already have in my collection or something that isn't what I expected. But honestly, I just wanted to give it a try for myself. I don't regret my choice. I'm probably going to enjoy using these eyeshadows quite a bit once I start pairing them with other eyeshadows that I have from Pat McGrath Labs. But I just wanted to point out that if you were expecting something like Voyeuristic Vixen, you're not going to get the same experience. You're going to get much more the experience from the eyeshadows that we got for the Holiday 2021 collection, when she also had these like look squads which had nothing really special going on about them. This is just a matte and 3 metallics. That's where it ends. Alright, and I think this pretty much concludes everything that I wanted to tell you today about these. If you have any additional questions, any additional swatches that you would like me to do, please do tell in the comment section below and I will do my best to oblige. But I think for now I'm just going to close the rambling and I'm going to start editing this video so that I can put it out as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!